feel bad, reaching out to somebody like, hey, do you mind doing this? I'll pay you an exposure.
Well, are we co-hosts or are we co-hosts? I mean, we can help out with that, dude.
Well,
not to toot my own horn, but I know a lot of people.
I got a former manager who's in a metal band that plays around the cities.
Fuck yeah, that's dope.
It's a fucking bassist, and it's like a hardcore like death metal band.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. Sounds like they all gargle battery acid.
Yeah. Yes. His band's on Spotify. I'm blanking on the name of it right now.
And that's the other issue I have is that I've listened to so many, like, when I originally was doing this, starting off, like, the intro music for ROA that we used to use, I was really into bluegrass for that time period.
Yeah.
Now I still listen to bluegrass stuff and, like, Western style country, but
like the Dead South and shit like that.
Yeah. Coulter Wall.
Yeah,
a lot, and the storytelling.
Devil Makes Three.
Yeah. Tyler Chill. I saw Devils Make Three in House of Blues out in Cleveland. They were a lot of fun. But now, I've been diving headfirst into like a lot of death metal and stuff like that.
And turning into a darker period.
Yeah. But not everybody wants to, hear that as an intro. So
the thing is, you can keep it eclectic. You can do a whole bunch of different stuff. No story left behind. Every single veteran has their own style of music. Man. It doesn't have to stick with one thing.
Right. And my big thing is that if I had GarageBand on my own computer, I could do it in my own time. I can just sit there and listen to, guitar's cool, and go down every single line of them.
Yeah.
I just feel bad eating up somebody else's time doing all that.
I'll talk to Nate.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Nate. He lives just about a mile away from us.
That was my favorite part of the Army, is like everyone comes from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I had a squad leader when I was overseas who was from Washington Park, which is a eastern section of St. Louis. It's right by Ferguson. It's a really fucking shitty area. And he was like, if we saw each other in the street, we probably wouldn't even acknowledge each other. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, that's what I love about the Army. Like, yeah, and that's what got me thinking. I'm like, oh yeah, he's right. I'm like, maybe I am a little racist. Maybe I should examine that.
I always try to go out and break those fucking norms down, man.
Yeah.
Because it does you a favor, and it also does it. Like, we were just down in South Carolina and freaking this packed restaurant. We were sitting at an oversized table. I had, there was 3 of us, and it was a table for 6 people. And this young black couple come walking in, and they were sitting there, and they're obviously like, fuck.
Yeah.
It was at the evening hour. It was time to eat and stuff. And so I just looked at him. I'm like, hey, man, you want to go European style? You guys want to sit with us? And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and they were like, sure, why not? Yeah. And so they sat down. They're local, And so I'm sitting there, and they're looking at us, and we're just gabbing back and forth, and and they looked at us. Y'all talk funny. Where are you from? You guys from Canada? No, we're not from Canada. Close, but not from Canada. Back where we come, that's fighting words. Just so you know.
Right. Yeah, got that a lot. Went out to Colorado for Ian and Caitlin's wedding, and they had friends from California there.
Yeah.
And they started chuckling. Like, what's so funny? Something I said. They're like, oh, you sound like you're from the movie Fargo.
Yeah.
Like, hold up now. Yeah. That's 2 states over.
I'm not a Youper. Okay?
Yeah.
That's funny though, because you can turn it on and off. Like, you can talk like a Youper if you want to.
Yeah.
Most people don't even realize it. But it turns out this young black girl, she was in the Army. She had freaking just gotten out and stuff, and so we were chatting about that and freaking, kind of changed a little bit of their perceptions and stuff. And it was kind of cool. It was a fun time. Blew about $150 on the whole freaking meal, but it was like, that was cool.
I hate when that happens.
That was like that dude was like that. I mean, he was. Everyone that you meet in the Army likes to pretend that they're like hard, like they're some kind of badass, and then you find out that they're from like a rich suburb of whatever city they say they're actually from. He was the one that I met that actually was fucking hard, and you can tell because like he doesn't get like animated when he tells stories. He's just like, yeah, this is this thing that happened when I grew up. And you're like, holy shit, that's fucked up. It was like his uncle was high on crack and raped his sister, and him and his brother beat the fucking shit out of his uncle or something like that. He just told it like that's a thing that happened, and we're all like, what?
Yeah.
But
Street
like
justice,
he was like he'd been demoted a couple times because he couldn't keep his mouth shut, but he was back up to E5, and like just hanging out with him, there's like 2 or 3 things that he's said to me that like just stuck with me when I became a leader. Like he was probably the best NCO I've ever worked for.
When did you retire at, Steve? I know.
I didn't retire.
Well,
I got out
get
after
out.
5 years.
Yeah.
I got out as a sergeant who'd been doing a staff sergeant's job for a year, but they took that promotion board and dangled it in front of me and was like, "Hey, if you re-enlist," my first sergeant straight up said to me, "Hey, as soon as you re-enlist, they'll send you to the promotion board." And I'm like, "Thanks for making my decision. I'm getting the fuck out. Like, I've been doing the job for a year better than 2 of the other staff sergeants in this fucking platoon." Like,
they did it to me too before I retired. And I told them point blank, like, this is the last job I'm ever going to do in the I did not want to go to sergeant major school. Not only that, it was a 3-year commitment, you know, and my body was just kind of like, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, so I was like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'll be a first sergeant. That is the rank that I want to do. And I went into the NCO Corps, you know, and I was like, yeah, you know.
Yeah, I felt good about that. Like I'd been a sergeant for 2 years. I'd done team leader and a substantial amount of squad leader time. Like I had the other main dismounted squad leader in our platoon had been a staff sergeant since 2006, and it was 2014 at this point. And I'm like, shit, man, I was in high school in 2006. Like, how come you are not a sergeant first class yet? Like, you're a fucking outstanding NCO. And he's like, I don't want to be a sergeant first class. He's like, I don't want to start like doing more paperwork and not dealing with people. So what he would do was, I don't know what the requirements are in National Guard, but for active, you have like there's a fucking checklist.
Yeah, I just say this is something. Yeah.
Well, I know they don't have promotion boards. At least in reserve, reserves didn't have promotion boards.
National Guard
does.
National Guard did. Well, at least Wisconsin did. I don't know.
Okay.
They modeled it.
Yeah, it's weird. It kind of varies by where you're at.
It's all changed now. Like the NCOES, the rating, like they switched it over to the officers. The way that like how the officers got rated, and you can only rate. Like your best guy, you can only rate him as your best guy for his first. Yeah. You know, it's super convoluted and confusing and mixed up and chalk that up to another reason why I'm glad I got the fuck out. You know.
But he like had this whole checklist of shit that he had to do, and he just refused to take his official DA photo. So he checked every other box, and they would always try to promote him. He'd be like, I don't have the DA photo. Sorry. So he sat at staff sergeant. They eventually got him.
The Army photo.
So that's like
you have to be in your class A's dress uniform.
Think of it like glamour shots for the Army.
They did finally get him. But it took them like he was a staff sergeant for at least a decade.
That was my favorite rank. Staff sergeant. It was my favorite.
The ironic thing is, if they had promoted me, I probably would have stayed in for a couple more years as a staff sergeant because I loved being a squad leader.
Yeah, squad leader was the best.
I loved being a squad leader.
You had a little bit of freaking leeway.
I had two great NCOs as team leaders under me. One who I got to promote, which was great because he was a fucking outstanding NCO. I had a good squad, and if they had just said like, "Hey, we'll send you the promotion board," because boards are bullshit. If I make it in the room, I'm gonna pass the board. They're bullshit. So if they'd sent me and let me get that promotion, I probably would have at least signed for another 3 years. But because they were like dangling in front of me and doing this quid pro quo nonsense, I was like, I'm out. I'll go get my degree and do something else.
To answer your question, I was in for 20 years. Little over 20 years. I timed it out perfect. I was supposed to go to I went to my last formation and everything, and my command wasn't really too happy with me at the time, so because I was like, I basically said, "Fuck you, I'm out, I'm done." You know, do I have to do this, that, and the other thing? No, I don't. I got my letter, man. I'm out. You know, there's nothing we can do. I'm out. DD 214, and I think it's DD 234 is your actual retirement paperwork that you get, and then you get the honorable discharge.
I finally just got that because I signed up.
Forever, man.
I signed up for more IRR when I hit my 8 years, just because I was like, I thought I wanted to do the officer route eventually. So I was like, this will be easier if I'm don't have to go through MEPS again. Yeah. I'll just do IRR, and then after like a year and a half, I was like, yeah, I'm not going back in. But that finally expired beginning of January, and like 3 weeks later, I got my honorable discharge in the mail. I'd stopped talking to the guy who was texting me like months before. Well, I made an effort with him, but he'd be like, hey, we should meet for like the yearly thing. And I was like, cool, can you do it this week? And he'd be like, no. And then he'd text me like 2 months later and say the same thing, and eventually I was like, I'm done, man. Like you're just checking a box. Like I'm not putting in the effort anymore.
And that's the goofy thing is like it's like trying to get a freaking ID card to show my retired status. It's the amount of red tape that you have to go through. You got to schedule an appointment, and then you go to the appointment. No, the guy was sick and didn't show up today, so well, you guys are 4 weeks out. Plus, it was almost impossible during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, they weren't like the Army went full just freaking crazy scared about COVID-19.
They were pretty anal.
They were super anal about it. It'd be funny because like you'd go to a sporting event and nobody's wearing a mask except for the 4 guys down there in the color guard. They're all masked up and everything. It was like, oh, you poor guys, I feel bad for you, but ha ha. You'd laugh at them and shit.
I mean, they should. They're probably relaxing it now because it's like hospital admissions are down like 66% or something. It was a lot.
Honestly, I quit keeping track of it. I reached a saturation point. Last time I saw you when you came over to our place in Hudson, that was like a year and a half ago.
Longer than that, even maybe.
And it was I got it in October.
2 summers.
2 summers ago.
Yeah, that's
when it was first coming out, because Jenny had it that June before.
Yeah.
And then I got it in October, and that was the last time I had seen you.
Yeah.
And it fucked me up pretty bad.
Yeah.
And after I recovered from it, and I could start smelling shit again, I was like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I really don't care anymore. And I'm pretty sure I had it again. I'm pretty sure it did. But at this point, I was like, I don't care anymore.
I got it once. It was October 2020. Yeah. Because I woke up
right after I did.
No. Was it? Yeah, I think maybe it was.
Because everybody that was at my house that day got COVID, except for my wife, because she already had it. But everybody got COVID.
But I woke up it was like a Tuesday morning, and I had like the sniffles, stuffy nose, whatever. But it was like the first time I threw I threw the heat on for the first time that year, that night. So I chalked it up, the dust being kicked up, whatever, no big deal. By lunch, I had full-blown fever, chills, the body ache, like my joints felt there was fucking concrete in them.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm like,
did you get the lethargic, lethargic, like you couldn't think straight? And you're just like,
and I at the time I was managing 300, 400 accounts, and I would get 50, 60 phone calls a day, plus I'm seeing 15, 20 people a day, and I'm trying to keep all that shit straight in my head, and I just I'd have a conversation 10 minutes later, I'm trying, what did we just talk about? Paint, shit, But by noon, it's like I called the store manager that I worked with. I'm like, hey, I'm going home. This isn't good. Yeah. And I got lucky. I got into the drive-through testing the next morning, and even the nurse. I mean, she comes out in the full hazmat gear. Yeah. And she stops and looks out. As I roll down my window so she could do the nose swab. She stops and goes, "Are you sure you don't want to come inside? We do have beds available."
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, I've had worse. But yeah, let's just get this over with. But yeah, the fever kicked my ass for 5 days straight.
So, the thing that I thought was the weirdest about it, so I had the same thing happen. I just, the body ache was insane. The fever was insane, and to me it felt like bronchitis. I thought I had bronchitis, so I called into work a couple days.
Oh, that shit sucks.
Yeah,
I've had that
it was the same thing.
So I never noticed any breathing issues, and I had breathing issues later on. Yeah. And the breathing issues, like Jenny got COVID pneumonia, so she was in the hospital for 4 days, which was scary as fuck, But anyways, so I was just like, I got up in the morning. I'm trying to suck it up, drive on, man. I'm trying to fucking gut it out. And I go in and I wake up in the morning. I'm like, oh god, I feel like crap. Oh god, what am I gonna do? So I go to make coffee. Doing my normal morning routine, I go to make coffee. I figured pop open the coffee. I grind my own beans. I'm a coffee Nazi. Yeah. Fuck! I can't smell it. Shit! I have COVID. I couldn't taste nothing, and I felt really bad because 3 days on down the road, I'm miserable, man, and like the fever hit really bad,
And once that fever hits, you can't do it. You just lay there and
Yeah.
you're a big ball of goo of misery, you know, and you're just laying there.
Yeah.
And Jenny goes out and she gets like all this Italian pasta and freaking spicy sausage. She makes this great Italian meatball soup, you know, which I love. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. You know?
Yeah.
She comes in, she hands it to me, and she's like, "Here, baby, here, this is for you." And I'm like, I'm forcing myself to eat it. You know? She's like, "How is it?" I'm like, "It's the best chunky water I've ever had in my life." But it stuck with me. I didn't have my sense of taste or smell for like a good 6 months after that, man. You know, but yeah, that was right.
See,
That was the last time I saw.
I was worried about the breathing thing because I have asthma that's bad enough as is.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice anything until.
And you're fat.
Yeah, that doesn't. I haven't skipped many meals. But
you say that with respect.
Yeah. This motherfucker once ate a whole loaf of bread at my house. We were like,
I was hungry.
We were probably like 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And he'd spend the night like we're just playing Halo, because that was the thing to do in the mid 2000s. And he's like, "I'm hungry," and I'm like, "Here, have some bread." He like no butter. No, nothing.
Bread, yeah.
He just handfuls of bread into his fucking face. I remember the next day my dad's like, "Where'd the bread go?" And I'm like, "Gordon ate it."
I gotta respect it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Plain ass bread eats the whole fucking loaf.
So
yeah.
that was my big concern. But by December, like I didn't have any breathing issues during or after. I'm like, cool, we're good. But then all of a sudden December hits, we hit that first big chill. You know, it's minus 20 outside. My car fucking froze to the point. I had to use propane heaters to warm it up, just to get the battery so I could get into my car. But I took I was taking the garbage out. That's maybe 100 feet off my old back door, and from the time it got there and then maybe a quarter of the way back, I couldn't breathe at all. Like grabbed my chest, crawling into my house, like what the fuck? And I don't have an inhaler since maybe high school.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
this is not good.
You don't keep a rescue inhaler?
No, because mine is mostly I get it if I'm doing a lot of cardio.
Okay.
I can run quarter mile, half mile maybe before.
Do you get like seasonal stuff? Because like my lungs got fucked up in Iraq, you know, and so like I take this freaking, it's like this pink disc thing that I got.
Yeah.
I only use it every now and then because like I started reading some of the side effects and I was like,
burn pits.
Yeah, burn pits. Yeah. I slept right next to one for.
You on the registry?
Yep.
I still got to do that.
Yeah. Like I came back from Iraq and my lungs, and almost every single person who was in that unit that I know, still talk to, they all have lung issues as well. You know, so I got like this Advair thing and fucking up the microphone here, but I keep a rescue inhaler every now and then because if I go from a really warm environment to a really cold environment, dude, it's gnarly. You know, like
below zero will screw me up
know.
if I'm doing. Aside from just like normal walking around, but like I had to go deliver. I think we were pushing. Me and my sister went out and had to run 600 gallons out to a job site, and that killed me. But it was also minus 32 with wind chill. But as soon as I, get back in the, I'm running the truck, and once I get back in the heat, it's fine again.
Yeah.
Albeit, I used to be pretty good and have it all managed until I was 21, 22, got introduced to cigars.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody told me that not to inhale cigars, so I was inhaling for 2 years, and
Jesus,
I didn't think much of it.
Thinner, dude.
Yeah.
Damn.
And the first time I noticed that it was an issue is when I jumped into the St. Croix River. We're just swimming off the dock and everything. I got 10 feet and I thought I was going to drown. I'm like, I probably shouldn't be inhaling these.
That's weird too, because like most people who smoke and then they try to smoke cigars, they almost always try to inhale them. I'm so glad I quit smoking. I quit.
You trying to swim between islands?
No, we're down off Buddy's place. His parents were kind of between Hudson and Stillwater up on the bluffs. But they have the trail that goes down to their own little, like that. Their cul-de-sac had their own little beach area. Okay. So we're just swimming off that.
So those islands are deadly.
No, it's on the river. It's just north of. You can see the St. Croix Bridge or the 36 bridge from their place. They're
okay. Right north of 36 there.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
People underestimate those islands. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Almost every year, when I lived in Hudson, almost every year, one or two people, usually a young kid. Usually, it happened to try to swim the channel.
It happened to us. Well, I've swam that channel twice with Jew. Second time we got called dumbasses. Like, we were probably halfway across the river, and this guy like, you guys need help? Like, no, we're just swimming. And fucking dumbasses. Like, speeds off. Like, we were like 19 at the time. But
Yeah, it used to go from the high school down to the end of the dike.
Yeah.
And then we'd either run or bike down there, and then swim to the island, sprint across the islands, and then reverse it. And
well, that was we went down there when I was running cross country. There was like 8 of us that went down there one day.
You
and
weren't
we were
TPing
swimming
my trees.
when we weren't TPing your house. Yeah. We did that a couple times. When we weren't TPing your house.
Sorry, Mom.
Back to back. Wasn't it like back to back weeks or something?
Yes, because my mom would wake me up at 6:30 in the fucking morning on a Saturday to go clean it up. She's like, "Who did this?" Like, I don't.
If it makes you feel better, I felt kind of bad while I was doing it.
Trees and
just hose it down with water or
right,
something.
yeah,
Get
but
that septic stuff.
she was mad because the neighbors would see. Like, I don't.
So we went down there. So we went down there the one day, and there's like 8 of us, and we swam like 2 or 3 islands out, and we're coming back between like 2 of the bigger ones, where it's a couple 100-meter swim, which doesn't sound like a lot, but swimming's a lot harder than running. And we're like maybe halfway, and Prue's leg cramps, and he's a big dude.
Yeah,
like Prue is a big dude, and I hear him fucking yelling. And I'm a good swimmer. Like, I was a mediocre runner, but I was a really good swimmer. And I hear him fucking like screaming, and his head's going under. And I swam like 100 meters back out there, grabbed his ass around his neck, and I dragged him back to the island because his calf had cramped, and he couldn't deal with it in the water. I'm like, man, what were you gonna do if I wasn't here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've had my camp.
You were gonna die.
One of the funniest times I ever scared my wife is it was about freaking 3 o'clock in the morning. And I got a freaking really bad calf cramp. And Mina woke me up out of a dead
Shit
sleep.
sucks.
And I came out screaming. Ah! About sent my wife through the room. And, what the fuck's going on? Shut up, rub my calf.
No, we did Tough Mudder as our charity event when I was in the fraternity. And the very last thing you do, last real event, I mean, you run through the taser wires, but there's like 1 in 10 that are active anyway. You jump off a 50.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, after the car battery to the back of the head, it wasn't shit. But you jump off a 50-foot drop into a pool of water. And they have rescue divers. And of course, and when they did in Somerset that year, it was 12 point something miles. And I mean, you go at your own pace, it's not bad, very manageable. But I was dehydrated by the end of that. The second I hit water, I felt my calf just cramp up. My foot is touching my ass because I can't unbend my leg. I'm just kicking myself to the surface. And I look at the nearest safety diver, and he's about to say, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Calf cramp? Calf cramp?" He's like, "Oh, it happens all the time, Con."
That's hilarious.
First time that happened to me was I was swimming. I got done with like probably a 7,000 yard workout. Jesus. And I'm cooling down, and my right calf goes, and I'm just like, my head's out of the water. I'm like, motherfucker! Like, I'm cussing a blue streak. I'm like trying to get to the side, and my left calf goes, and now I'm just like fucking every word out of my mouth. Like, motherfucker, son of a bitch! I get to the side, and the little kids that swam after us are all standing there, and they're all like, and my coach is like, shut up! I'm like, my calves! Like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure a bunch of those 8-year-olds got an education in cussing that day. That shit hurts though, and like you can't do anything with that leg once it goes until you get that cramp out.
Right. No.
So we did a couple of interviews for the show while we were on the pandemic, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, because I was still at the house.
We
did that one guy
2 or 3.
We had Joe on in April. I think we had Dakota on at one point.
Yeah, Dakota. That's right. He was the first Zoom interview.
Yeah,
I did
and
ever.
then we had.
It was the first what?
Zoom interview I've ever done.
Oh.
And then we had your buddy
Dustin. Yeah.
Dustin. We had the one.
Yeah, I knew him.
We had the one
Nino.
from. And then we had the one from the Air Force.
Yes.
So,
yeah, he was a gunner on Spooky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Casey.
Casey.
Something I can't think of his last name now.
Was Nina the last one we did?
Yeah, it was.
That was a good one.
It was.
So what have you guys been doing since then?
Work.
2 of us have moved.
Yeah. Well, I moved. I moved. Well, I got a call last September. As we're talking now, it's March. I got a call in September. My boss was like, "Hey, there's a spot opening up in Eau Claire. Are you interested?" And I said, "No, not really. Been there, done that. But thank you." Then they called me back 2 weeks later. Said, "Hey, we'll give you this massive raise." And I said, well, since you put it that way, yeah, I kind of want to go to a
change
player.
the dynamics of the
Yeah,
conversation.
Yeah.
And well, part of that was I said, well, let me go down there. I went down to where I'm at now, the new store. Well, it's not new for me, and met my assistant manager who has been there. He started part-time in college. He's been with the company for 4 years. The staff had been there. The newest employee has been there for a year. So everybody knows what they're doing. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's the big reason why I took it. And all of a sudden got the green light early October from my immediate bosses, but then of course corporate had to give the final sign-off and they took 3 weeks. So it went from working my job one day to, hey, you start on Monday. I go, what? But thankfully in that 3 weeks, it gave me a chance to tell my customers and start looking for a place and everything. But yeah, that sucked up a lot of my bandwidth. And then of course I think we reached out. So originally we wanted to get together last fall to start this new project. Who's from it's I just wanted to go through listening to other podcasts and kind of break down other books and stuff that have actually caused me to go and buy those books and stuff. I had the same idea with Clear the Prop, Memoirs of a World War II Carrier Crew Chief and the Lifelong Pilot, Elmer Wishart, who I got to meet and interview back in 2020, I think it is.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, just turned 100 back in December. So he's 99 when I met him, and he's the first full-time pilot instructor for Russ County ever, and of course World War II vet. And he used to go to the high school and talk to the students every semester, every year, or something like that. And it must have been an administration change, or maybe that teacher retired, whatever the case was. He hadn't talked to anybody in 15-ish years or so.
Yeah.
But the reason I found out about him is because one of my customers mentioned, "Oh, you do a podcast, blah blah. You should talk to Elmer." I'm like, "Who's Elmer?" And started giving me a brief description of what he's done, and mentioned he has a book. I'm like, "Oh, cool!" So I bought the book, started reading. I'm like, "Holy shit, I want to meet this guy."
Technically, about 3 books.
Yeah. And and got to talk to him. And for being 99 years old, I mean, sharp as a whistle on all the stories and then some more, and got to expand on a bunch of stuff. Sorry?
I don't know. I didn't know whistles were sharp.
Sharp as tack, yeah. And
as clean as a whistle.
Yeah, clean as a whistle. Yeah, there we go.
An attempt was made. Continue.
It's Boondock Saints, annual Boondock Saints movies coming.
Get like a tree and
but yeah, when we pull up, he lives out in the outside of town. There's like 3 or 4 houses by him, and I'm pulling up, and of course it's Justin, gauged ears.
Yeah.
He's got face piercings, tattoos, gauged ears. We're both the size of Shrek, and we're getting out of the car at this 99-year-old guy's house.
Yeah.
And his neighbor's like, "Well, who the fuck are you guys?" I'm like, "Oh, we're here to talk to Elmer." And
we're here for the rent money.
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, why are you talking to Elmer?" He's a crew chief back in World War II, flew all over the world, wrote a book. He goes, "Really? I didn't know that." I'm like, "How the fuck? What?" Yeah, he was he's taught a few hundred people on how to fly out of your airport here in town, and has
did he do
all
the
these
CAF?
speaking.
Was he in civilian air patrol or anything?
No. He grew up born in North Dakota. His family bought a farm in Ladysmith, Wisconsin area, and he moved down to he wanted to enlist, but he already had 2 older brothers already enlisted. And his parents were like, "Please don't enlist." He goes, "That's fine. I will wait until I get the draft notice, and then I'm gonna go." And
this is for the big dance, World War II.
Yeah. And joined the Army Air Force, became crew chief. He's a sergeant. Came back afterwards. Yeah.
So clearly, I read the book.
Yeah. And and the book is just about his story before, during, and after the war. Okay. And like I said, first full-time instructor at Russ County, and taught several hundred people how to fly. Worked with he showed us a letter from one of I think it was a former student who was also a Boy Scout leader, and got him to come speak to that. And then he did speaking engagements with the school and stuff. All these cool stories. But talking to him, the first time we met him, he wasn't too sure because he hears again 2 Shrek-sized people walk into his house, but as soon as we started talking, he started showing us pictures, and there's pictures throughout the book. He lit up like a kid on Christmas.
We're here for the gangbang.
So
I apologize.
That was the first thing that came to mind.
And
to be honest,
after talking to him, it's like I would like to just kind of break down the book with you guys and get your input on it because I find it absolutely fascinating. I know, Josh, you've talked about being a fan of history and stuff.
Yeah, man. So it's like I just did a huge history tour too, but I'll dig that book out. Next time we chat, we can unpack that freaking pretty seriously. I'll read the book and it sounds like an interesting story, but yeah, man, we freaking, speaking of history, we just went on like, so every year I go to Florida. My dad lives in Florida. He lives just outside of Gainesville, and I didn't really feel like just going down there this time and spending 4 or 5 days sitting around watching the Fox News because my dad he's enraptured with Fox News, but.
I relate to that pretty hard.
Yeah.
We're going to Arizona at the end of this month, and it's going to be,
So I was talking to my wife, and I was like, look, we need to do a trip within a trip. So Andersonville, I don't know if you know what Andersonville is.
Yeah.
You know what Andersonville is. Almost everybody in the Army's heard of it. So Andersonville is a Civil War era prison that the Confederates ran. And it was almost like the Holocaust type concentration camp before the concentration camps and the Holocaust happened. Really bad. And then you shoot about 2 hours straight east and you got Savannah, Georgia, which is, if you know your Civil War history, Sherman's march across, he hit Atlanta, then he went straight down to Savannah, and then he shot over to Charleston, shot up the coast.
Burned a really long way.
Yeah, it was scorched earth. He was the first one who invented it.
What was it, a year or 2 ago, and they were really big on renaming all the army bases that were named after Civil War generals.
Yeah.
I was like, well, shit, if you're gonna rename Fort Benning,
Sherman,
call it Fort Sherman.
Yeah.
Rub some more salt in that wound.
Every single Southerner out there was like, that's not a good idea. So, and then we wanted to hit Charleston, which is where Fort Sumter's at. And I'm a big Civil War historian. I wrote papers on it when I was in college, and thought about writing a book about it. But so that's all within 2, 3 to 5 hours away from where my dad lives. So we decided that we were going to do this big freaking history tour. Well, we cut, just for logistics, we cut Andersonville out, and we said we'll save that one for another tour, another day. So we shot up to Savannah, and we went to the 8th Air Force. They have their own museum there in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
And it was one of the coolest places I've ever been, man. And my dad actually looked up some of our family history, and we had a family member who flew with the 8th Air Force, and you can go to that museum, and they will pull up his entire service record.
That's really cool.
For you, The guy ended up, he wasn't killed in action, but he died in action. So he had an equipment malfunction, and he was a tail gunner on a B-24. And the B-24 had gone in, they had done their run, and they had saw some action as they were coming back. They had an equipment failure, and he died because of loss of oxygen. And when they found his body, he was like 6 to 8 inches away from getting his reserve, and he died. He passed out, and then lost consciousness and died. So we were reading about this. We found some old diaries that he had written, some pages of the actual units, his history and stuff. Super cool, Then we shot over to Charleston and spent 3 days in Charleston. And we saw Fort Sumter, the Yorktown, a couple other warships. They had this old ass submarine, which I was like, "You're crazy if you think I'm getting on that," because I don't deal well with them. Was
it actually in the water? Or?
It was in the water. Yeah, it was all rusted out, and it was leaking in the water. Yeah, that's a hard pass. No.
If you want to see, if you go to the Museum of Science and Technology in Chicago, they have a full U-boat that they've built. Like it's in this massive building, and there's a whole exhibit around it with all these artifacts, and it's really cool. But you can actually go inside that U-boat.
Yeah, I'd be doing something like that, cool. But this was in the water. I got a picture. I'll show it to you later on. I was like, Yeah, fuck no.
So submarines can be a little disconcerting.
Intimidating. Yeah,
I've been on one, and
Yeah.
being down like I think we dove to like 600 feet. You can hear it creaking around you, and
I
you're
don't
just
know
like,
how those guys did it. Like
Yeah.
that would have drove me.
I was just watching a quick, it's like a 3-minute documentary. I can't think of it. Anyway, about the Ohio class submarine,
Yeah.
and then this during the Cold War, biggest submarine
Yeah.
ever, and then Russia said, "Oh, you think your dick's big? Well, check out our
Yeah.
Typhoon class," and they show people standing on top of it while it's still in the water, and they're tiny. It's bigger than a 2-story house. It's massive, and there's still not enough money in the world you can get me to walk onto one of those.
Nope, I'm with you, man. I hard pass. Thank you, but no.
Enclosed spaces don't bother me, but you're in a pressurized tuna can.
Enclosed spaces bother me. Yeah, it was even going on the Yorktown. There were some spots there. I was like, oof, man.
And thank God I'm not claustrophobic, because a few years ago, 2019, went to Berman's. No, it was before. No, Berman's wedding was 2019. When did I go to his Clark's wedding? Was that 2018?
I didn't go to Clark's wedding. I went to the reception.
Yeah. Anyway, so when I went there, we're in Tennessee, and I shot over to Mammoth Cave, and our buddy of ours was working there, and he was one of the park directors, I guess. And he took me on a private tour of Mammoth Cave. And rather than you pay $15-20 for a tour, go in and out, I got like 6 that day. But of course he thought it'd be hilarious. So he took me through the one where there's I think it's called Fat Man's Misery and Tall Man's something or another. So for several hundred feet, you're bent over at the waist, just trying to crawl through this thing. There's another one where if you're 6 inches wide, you can glide through that like butter. But of course, I'm lifting up the beer barrel and trying to squeeze my way through this thing, and you're 300 some feet below surface.
That was my wife at Cave of the Winds when we went in the deeper tour, the candle lit tour, or whatever they call it. There's a part where you have to bend down.
That's the one in South Dakota, right?
No, it's the one in Colorado Springs.
Okay, yeah.
So I was stationed out there for 3 years, and that was like one of the first things we did as we went to Cave of the Winds.
Yeah, dude, there's this one in South Dakota. When we were down there for Sturgis, we shot south of Sturgis. There's this entire humongous, like they say it's about the entire cave system is about the size of freaking Minnesota, and it's underground, and it goes layer upon layer upon layer, and there's like parts where like the old boy went there and never came back, and it was like, and you guys are giving tours of this.
Yeah.
Fuck you. No, but it's safe. Yeah, fuck you. I'm out. No. And I just don't deal well with. I get really claustrophobic. It's funny. I figured out I was claustrophobic because I had to get a freaking MRI done, and they stuck me in the tube, and I scooted my ass out. I didn't know it, and they're like, "You're claustrophobic." I am now. My God, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I spent less than 48 hours on a submarine. So my first stint in college, right after I graduated high school, I did Navy ROTC. So they sent us out, I think the summer between my freshman sophomore year, they sent us out to Norfolk for a month, and they just had us do a week with the different communities to kind of see what it was like and what we were interested in doing. And we went down to Kings Bay, Georgia for a week at the submarine base, which that's actually how I got my secret clearance, because you had to have a secret clearance to set foot on the submarine. And we were on there for a little under 48 hours, but they at one point they dove down to 600 feet, and they started doing, they call them I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's like angles and dangles, I think, where they go down 5 degrees and they go up 5 degrees and they go down 10 degrees, and they just keep going to it was 30 or 35 degrees. And when they're going down 35 degrees, you could lean all the way back and almost touch the ground without falling over, because you're on such a steep incline. And when they did that one, I guess the XO was asleep in his bed, and it rolled him out of his bed, and all the officers thought it was the funniest shit in the world, because he's a fucking 05 or something, dude, came rolling out of his bed. But the morning we were headed back, so we went 80 miles off the coast. I went up at 4 in the morning. The guy who was on watch was just stoked to have someone else up there, because he's usually sitting up there by himself, and so he's showing me pictures of his kids and shit. But as
bonding, and you're just
I'm just taking in the ocean. There was a full moon. It was fucking great. And as the sun started to come up, this pod of dolphins showed up in front of the submarine, and there's like probably 50 dolphins
Yeah,
like, just
they,
swimming,
they
just swimming in
go
front of the
lake,
submarine.
yeah.
I took video of it, but I've lost it since. But at one point, one like jumped up and the wave went out and it landed on the submarine, and it must have got knocked out. It just like laid there for a couple seconds, and I'm like, is that thing all right? He's like, I'm sure it's fine. And like 5 seconds later, I think it came to, and it started like flapping around and rolled off the side. Fucking knocked its ass out.
It's a Russian goddamn dolphin.
And like, especially being tall or being bigger on the submarine, like you can't move without like bumping into something. And I'd gotten sunburned because I fell asleep on the beach for like an hour, like 2 days before, so my whole upper body was fried, and I kept bumping into shit. But it was, I don't know that I could do that for jobs.
And Russian dolphin, did you guys ever see? It's on the internet, so take it as a grain of salt. I'm gonna call it like 90% bullshit. But there's the porpoise or whatever, the white one. It's a white dolphin-looking thingy.
Beluga whale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beluga whale that was like playing volleyball or whatever with not volleyball, like fetch essentially. Yeah. Well, then and they found like a harness on it, and turns out it was part of this Russian training program trying to use dolphins and whatnot to
wouldn't surprise me.
Go find mines and shit like that.
They've tried that shit in the past.
Yeah,
I know the Americans did that.
Yeah,
too.
They tried that shit with dolphins. I mean, dolphins are smart.
But people
and they got that echolocation that is
like, oh, it's so cute. This dolphin is playing fetch with us, and turns out it's actually trained to actually do it.
It's a Russian whale.
Yeah. Like, Jesus Christ.
I don't know, man. Freaking Russians are. I don't know. We did the same shit too, though. I can't really talk about that much.
Yeah. Cold War was a.
So, what have you been doing since the freaking pandemic kicked off?
So right when the pandemic kicked off, we lost our biggest client in my last job, which was like a third of our engineers. So that was a pretty harrowing time. Like, am I going to get laid off? Am I not going to get laid off? Like, the two guys that sat on either side of me both got laid off. So like, I went into work and I'm sitting there in an empty row, like, my ass is fucking next. So they offered to let me go to Texas for a while to work on a Lockheed Martin project, and I was like, yes, I will take that. So I spent the back half of 2020 traveling to Fort Worth.
Did you ever get out to the birds I told you about?
No, so much shit was closed, man, because that was still like 2020 at the time. And then I did that through the middle of 2021, and then ended up leaving that job. I work at Northrop Grumman now. So
how's that going?
It's pretty good so far.
Are you back from? I know you're in Iowa.
No, I never went to Iowa. I was supposed to go to Iowa.
So the weekend where we could have originally done this, you weren't gone.
They were like, you're gonna go, and then I didn't go.
Yeah.
It was part of the reason. That was kind of a dumb project. It's one of the reasons I left. But it's I mean, they gave me a 19% raise to switch jobs, so it's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So same company then, or just different department, or
no? I completely left. I worked for a company that contracted out because most companies don't end up testing a lot of their own software because it's kind of tedious, and their employees don't want to do it. So we'd get contracted out to do that.
I hear Adobe's hiring right now, so they fix their bug in their software.
I'm still testing software, but it's at a different level. Instead of like a base code level, I'm testing on like actual hardware. And it's interesting. I work on the software I'm working on right now is like the stuff that goes in fuses for artillery rounds.
Fuses.
What?
What do you mean in
fuses?
Oh, fuses.
Like that goes into the fuse on the artillery round.
Gotcha.
It's called like a multi-option fuse for artillery. You can set it to different things like
it's a gunpowder infused IP.
Whether it's you can set it to like point detonate, delayed, airburst. Like,
sure.
But instead of having like 4 different rounds, it's just a different fuse on the same round. That's kind of the way the Army, like military in general, has been going. It's like trying to have one thing that can do 5 different things instead of having 5 different things. It's like the F-35 they got for 3 different jobs. It's supposed to replace 3 different aircraft. So that's what I've been currently working on. But it's shit that I've never done before. So it's a lot of learning.
See, I assume that every artillery video I've seen that's come out of say the last 5 years, it's still hold the string and turn your head away.
Somewhat.
But it's the shell and the fuse itself.
They got laser guys.
Seems to be
The old copperhead system.
Yeah, I mean
the copperhead system.
That's one of the things that the facility I work at does too. Is the canards, which go on the front of the artillery round. Been developing smart ones that'll let it like adjust mid-flight, which is good because most artillerymen fucking suck at their jobs. You can send that to Berman. Our
Except
friend,
for any artilleryman that wants to come on the show.
Yeah.
one
come on
of
the
our,
show and
our
debate
friends, one of our friends growing up was Marine artillery.
Yeah.
So
I started out as an FO, man. I was a 13 Fox. I carried two.
Yeah.
They had 13 Fox and then I transferred over. And I was like, well, I'm carrying a radio. I might as well just carry a rucksack instead of a radio. So, you know.
I've had some good FOs. I had some shitty ones too.
You know, being an FO is a lot of fun because you can.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot you can do. They call in close air support, calling in naval, calling in. Freedom,
Yeah, he called in close air support like on. I wasn't with that section of the platoon, thankfully, but he called in close air support on them, and like the A-10s, like they could see the A-10 coming down.
Yeah.
It was like 200 meters away. They're out there waving like stop.
Yeah, doing the old thing from when
His
soldiers.
they pulled him off after that. He was like permanent COR after that.
Yeah.
He literally was just in charge of maintaining the guard positions because they were like, you just about got people killed by a fucking A-10.
It's weird too because like the way the doctrine was going, almost they started training infantry guys as on how to call in. It was mostly calling in artillery, but they started working with close air support too. So I mean, almost all the infantry guys knew how to do it.
Yeah, they had all. We were all trained up on how to.
Hey, you were infantry, weren't you?
Yeah.
Well, you had to if you're in Colorado. It's Fort Carlson, right?
Carson.
Yeah, Carlson.
I mean, there's plenty of posts on Carson, but yeah, it's fourth ID.
Fourth AD. That's right.
Yeah. It was a bliss to start with first AD. We were the one light brigade that they had there, which since has been deactivated. But they wanted like it's a fucking armored division, but they wanted a light brigade.
That's
so
what
when they told me they were sending me to Bliss, my drill sergeants are like, yeah, well, El Paso kind of sucks, but hey, at least you'll get a ride. And then I got there, and they're like, we're light.
We're going light.
Like, you're fucking walking everywhere.
Cool thing about light though is you get more freaking. You get to air assault and all that stuff. You get to go freaking play with the air guys. You know.
We did have a couple. We did have a couple missions where we got dropped off via Chinook.
Yeah.
One Joe, who was on the podcast, puked on the one. It was great. We had to do a lot of like touchdowns. They would touch down like 6 or 7 times because we did it at night, and it was so the Taliban didn't really know where we'd actually been dropped off at, and I think just like that constant up and down was just too much for him. And
Chinooks are weird though. Chinooks because they're weird when you're riding in them. Yeah. Because you feel like you're going forward, but you're looking out the back.
Yeah, it fucks you up.
That thing turns by that back rotor. You know.
Yeah, it fucks.
So when you're going forward, and all of a sudden it swings over like that, and you're still feeling like it messes with you a little bit. It takes a little bit of adjustment.
Yeah,
it
does. So anyone listening that doesn't know what a Chinook is, that's the dual prop.
It's dual prop. Yeah.
What, designed originally as a troop carrier? Or
they've been making them since Vietnam days, man. They I think it was designed for.
Because you can put a shitload in that thing.
Well, it was so the Marines used to have that helicopter. It looked like a big grasshopper. And 2 pilots sat way high up, but you could cram. Yeah. You could cram like 30 dudes into that thing. Remember the movie Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah.
You know, and they're flying along, and that gunner's just killing freaking Vietnamese people. You know. And that was the helicopter that the Chinook replaced because they phased that thing out. But that was more of a Marine helicopter, and then the Marines came up with Chinook. Yeah. But then the Army and everybody else was like, "Yeah, man, that's a great design. It's been in service since the '60s. It's a great platform."
The Navy Sea Stallion? So what's the Navy?
Sea Stallion.
Yeah,
that's Marine One. That's the one that looks like Marine One.
They use they use the Osprey now, but they're trying to replace that with the V280, which my last company did some work on the V280 for Bell. But yeah, the Osprey was something else when that came out.
But they had a lot of problems with it.
Killed like 38 people the first year it was out, and then
they just drop out of the.
Because that came out like That came out like 2008 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But when I went to Norfolk for a month was like a year or two after that had been released, and when we did our week with the Marines, which was basically just a week of boot camp, they just put us in barracks and fucking screamed at us for a week, which was like great, cool. But at one point during one of the field exercises, they corralled us all into a field. And 2 ospreys came down, and a bunch of people were like, "Cool," and I'm sitting there like, I've read up on this, like 38 fucking people, and I'm sitting there like,
I don't want to do this.
no, like,
I don't want to do this, man.
So they crammed us all on there, and then the pilot did everything in his power to get people to puke. You can feel it when it kicks, because that's the one where the rotor, like it'll be like a helicopter, and then it'll flip to a prop plane. You can feel that shit kick in when it flips to plane.
Does it drop a little bit?
It drops a little bit, and then it just like accelerates rapidly, and then he was banking 90 degrees back and forth. He got a couple kids. He almost got me. I did not throw up, but I was close. There were a couple kids that were like immediately got off that thing and just all over the tarmac.
I remember coming out of Baghdad in 2004, freaking taking the C-130 home on leave, and that freaking pilot, he did a combat takeoff. So he's swinging back and forth. There's some young female lieutenant up there. It sounded like she was just getting railed. The guy was sitting there saying, "Now we know what it sounds like in the sack, right?" Yeah, Jesus Christ, dude. But I remember the crew chief like, "If you puke on this, I am not cleaning it up." I sure got some guys rolling it in there freaking.
I
thought it was fun. I was like, "Shit, yeah, man, this is a hot dog. Let's go."
I got it once, and that was when I was going out on R&R. So I got to Afghanistan right when they were notionally going to do 9-month deployments instead of year deployments, so they didn't have to give you R&R. But our battalion fucked it up, and they made it for like 273 days or something. It was just outside that, so they had to give us R&R. So then they ended up pushing it to like 11 months, to get their money's worth. But so I'm going out on R&R, and there's like 3 of us from the battalion, and one is the battalion.
Is that when
I think
he
came
back and got me absolutely?
Yeah, that's when I brought the absinthe back and damn near killed you with it.
Nice.
But because we stopped in Germany on the way back.
That was real absinthe too. It had wormwood in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I got that bottle.
So one of the guys going out was the major who was in charge of S3, and he was constantly swinging his dick around. And we're out there on the LZ for the tiny ass little fob that we had, and the winds were bad. It was like probably at least 60, 70 mile an hour winds. We should not have flown that day. Army aircraft would not fly. Like air was very red, but we had one of the civilian. It wasn't a Chinook. It was one of the bigger civilian choppers that they fly in and out. And they were like, "Yeah, sure, we'll fly." And he's like, "I got us a ride on them." And we're like, me and the other guy are like, "Motherfucker! Like, can't we just wait till tomorrow?" So we get on this, and we're only 8 miles from Fob Shank in RC East, which is like one of the biggest. It was one of the biggest fobs in RC East. So I'm like, this will be a short flight. Nah. So we're here. Shank's here. They did this on all the other fobs. So they kept going down and picking people up, and it was like a 2-hour flight at that point. They turned it into, and at one point we hit a pocket of what the pilots call bad air. And we lost 1,000. We lost 1,000 feet of altitude. We were in free fall for probably about 4 seconds. It felt a lot longer. Damn near hit the mountain, and we came out of that, and we came out of it like this. And I knew as soon as we came out of that, I'm like, I'm not gonna make it. The major's like turned to me like, "Private, how many rounds do you have for that machine gun?" Because we almost hit the mountain, and I'm like, "Sir, I got like 100 rounds. If we hit the mountain, we're fucking dead." Like, even if we don't die in the crash, I'm just gonna shoot. I'm gonna fucking shoot myself because I'm not getting captured.
You want me to shoot the fucking mountain or what?
But so we did like maybe 1 or 2 stops after that, and then I'm like, I'm feeling it, and the crew chief definitely saw me because he hands me a puke bag, and I lost it after that. But that was the only time I've thrown up in an aircraft, was almost hitting a fucking mountain. Because, flying on a day we shouldn't have been fucking flying.
Have you ever been in an aircraft when it loses air like that?
Yeah, when I was coming back, I was flying back from Cleveland, and
especially
we left in a thunderstorm. And like leading up to this, I was asleep before it even finished taxiing. And then I'd just wake up during landing because, the air pressure changed. And we were flying from Cleveland to Minneapolis, so we came over the Great Lakes.
Yep.
So that's Michigan. Yeah. And pilot came on and said, "Hey, we're expecting some turbulence. The storm's getting worse. Blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, no big deal." And I start to nod off again, and all of a sudden we dropped. I think he said 1,400 feet of elevation, like that, like you said. 4 seconds. We were less than 4 seconds.
It feels a lot more than that.
Yeah, it could have been a fucking lifetime for all I know, because it put probably half the gray hair in my beard. And then on landing, apparently this was the pilot's first day landing a plane, because he bounced the ass end of that plane off the tarmac, and I ripped up some seat with when I puckered up on that. Yeah. So
you lost that altitude at about 35,000 feet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And imagine losing it when you're only about
hell no
1,500 to 2,000 feet off the ground, and you're flying in between these mountains that are covered in fucking Taliban.
No.
Yeah, that was. Yeah.
It didn't help that. So whenever my company does a big, company-wide event, we all fly down on the 747s, everything. You get the free TV, but if you're just doing training like I was, then you're on the whatever plane sizes
regional
from
jets.
A twin prop.
Yeah.
The smallest jet that Delta
MD-88s
has. In the
or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm standing there like my head's...
The turbulence is always weird. The chop is a little worse than smaller planes.
It is.
I know there's supposed to be give in the wings, but it does not help me when I'm looking out the window and I see the engine bouncing up and down X amount of feet, and
yeah, the wings are like this. Yeah, like, Jesus Christ.
I mean, they're designed that way.
Yes, I understand that.
I have a degree in aerospace
brain.
engineering. Trust me, they're designed that way. They have to.
But that doesn't make me feel
rigorous,
better.
And they go through rigorous testing. Like testing the actual break point of those things. I mean, yeah, they could hit a break point, but you need to be in like hurricane force winds.
It's very rare that a plane is brought down from turbulence.
Yeah,
like it's almost unheard of.
Even like
helicopters are more susceptible to it.
There was that Southwest flight a couple years ago where like the casing came off the engine and people were freaking the fuck out, and they landed because people were freaking out, but it was like that doesn't really do anything. Like the casing is just there. For aesthetics, and so people can't actually see the engine. Like, it didn't actually affect the performance of the aircraft at all, but people were losing their shit because they could see the inside of the engine. They're like, we're all gonna die.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of smoke coming off that thing too.
There was a little bit, but at the same time, like you watch movies and an engine will go on an aircraft and it's like and it fucking crashes. But one, there's 4 engines.
Yeah, you can still glide.
And even if all 4 of them go out, like. Those are producing thrust in this direction, which is, is perpendicular to gravity going this way. Like losing the forward momentum doesn't make you drop out of the sky. No. Like you can glide. A lot of those planes can glide for 30, 40 miles.
Yeah,
which is fine. I'm fine with an airplane. Okay, cool. We can, you got Sully that lands a whatever size.
Oh yeah, he landed in the Hudson Bay there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he had to react quick though because he had just taken off.
Absolutely.
Like he wasn't cruising at 35,000 feet and had all this time.
But you cannot pay me enough money to get into a helicopter.
Oh, I love helicopters.
They're fun.
No,
they're
absolutely
fun.
No, because the second those propellers go out, it's just a bowling ball.
It'll just be fun because you spin a lot on your way down.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna get knocked out before you freaking hit.
Yeah, you're not.
What do they call it if you have engine or partial engine failure and then you just throw the motors back on to try to get enough lift right before you full rotate or something like that? I was reading
a helicopter.
Book. Yeah, it was a guy. I think it's called The Secret War. He was part of the. It was during the Vietnam era.
Air America and stuff.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. I read that book. Yeah.
They got hit by an RPG, I think it was, or his engine failed. Either way, they had a full crew, or fully loaded helicopter.
I don't think that was his main rotor. I think that was his tail rotor.
Yeah,
but they threw his engines in the overdrive.
But right before they hit ground, he just cranked it as hard as he could to try to stop it from, going in sideways. Yeah. And nobody's ever done that before. With a full load of troops in the back of it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is called Secret War is the book. I can dig it up here later today. But yeah, no, thank you. Hard pass. I will walk, drive, or take a Greyhound bus before you get into a helicopter.
I always thought helicopters were a lot of fun, man, especially the Blackhawks. Although I know Blackhawks, their track record isn't all that stellar.
I like Blackhawks better than Chinooks, even though Chinooks have a better track record and are actually faster. Like Chinooks don't feel faster because it feels like you're in a boat, kind of. But Chinooks will top out at I think 200 knots, and Blackhawks are like 160. But the Blackhawk's a lot smaller, and it just feels more nimble and feels like you're less likely to get hit by an RPG. So,
what's I remember when the war was kicking off in Iraq, right out the gate. There's a lot of coverage going on. Obviously, that was the thing, but there's a lot of talk of Black Hawk mechanical failures and operator errors. Like there's the two that crashed on a night op and stuff like that. Was that really common, or was that just the media pointing the camera lens in that direction?
If you fly long enough on the Blackhawks, you're gonna go down in one, basically. You know, I mean, that's what the old adage was. You know, is you fly on them long enough. I mean, they even allude to it in some of the books that the guys wrote, like the one they did about when they were flying in to get Osama bin Laden. The one guy looks at him, they started catching a lot of stuff, and the Blackhawks started acting funny. And he looked at it, the rest of the guys, he's like, everybody who's been on a Blackhawk that's crashed before, right? You know, and they were like, yeah, we've all been down on one of these things. He's like, okay, we're good. You know? So, I don't know. I flew on Blackhawks a lot, and I never saw one with a single problem. I never had a single problem with them. I flew on Chinooks. I did a shits and giggles ride on a Huey, and that was probably the scariest on a Huey. It was like, because it's vibrating bucket of bolts is basically what it was. Man. Loud, obnoxious. It was not a fun flight. Yeah, but the Blackhawks, I was always comfortable flying. And Chinooks, I was fuck it, let's go.
We've done a few times each, but it was basically like we did a Chinook to get out to our COP because our COP was up in the mountains, and it was pretty isolated from the rest of the province. There was one pass going in that was lined with IEDs, so they flew us in on a Chinook. They did figure eights around the COP for a while. And when someone's finally like, why are we doing this? Crew chief's like, oh, they're shooting RPGs at us. Like, that's fucking great. I wish I hadn't asked that question.
Great.
They dropped it, but like we didn't leave. They stopped. I mean, at one point they refused to send helicopters because the helicopters would always get RPGs shot at them. So we'd have to have the C-130s come in, and they'd do their drop, or they'd come in really steep, and then they'd tip up and they'd push their pellets of water out the back, and like half of it would explode when it hit the ground. But that's how we got
resupplied.
That's how we got resupplied for a while. So I only flew, I think I flew Chinooks in and out, and then we had we had a couple big ops where they sent in Chinooks, and then I flew Blackhawks when we went out for R&R. But no, they didn't. We didn't fly much.
I should say this: I only flew Chinooks and Blackhawks a couple times in theater. Most of our stuff was always in a training environment back here in the States. So I mean, and those are the maintenance on them they're well maintained. So I didn't do a whole lot of operational stuff in theater on Blackhawks or Chinooks. We only did a couple missions on either one. Most of our stuff was done with either Bradleys or we had a couple Mike 113s that was used just for
what's
Mike 113.
Yeah,
I mean, it looks like a tank. They'll mount a 50 cal, or if you're in the artillery, they mount a big glit system and a couple of toes on it. But
so compared to a Bradley, which I know what those
so
are.
They think like a Bradley without the turret.
Bradley without the turret. Yeah. The Bradleys, I hated. I despised.
Fuck them.
I fucking hated them.
Steve,
I spent 10 and a half. Because when I went to Carson, that was a heavy unit, and I'd missed NTC at Bliss because I showed up less than a month before they were deploying. Like that was great coming out of basic training and all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and told my wife, I'm gonna go down there, I'm gonna find us an apartment, it's gonna be great, I'll take leave, I'll come back and get you, and I get down there and they're like, hey, welcome to 1 for 1, we're going to Afghanistan in 3 weeks. And I was like, motherfucker. But the nice thing about that is I missed NTC.
NTC was fun.
I did not get that luxury at Carson.
NTC?
National Training
Fort
Center.
Ord, California.
It's in the Mojave Desert. You go there for about a month, and it sucks.
Oh, I hear that.
So when I went with Carson, we were a heavy unit. We had Bradleys. Yeah. We had Bradleys, but so one of the Bradleys was deadline before we even went out to the box. That's what they call being out in the field there.
Sure.
Is the box derivative from the sandbox because it's just fucking sand. And so
on the map, it looks like a big box.
And then that too.
So if you're in the box, that's a field training exercise.
Yeah, if people say they're in the box at NTC, it means they're actually out doing the training exercise.
I've heard FTX. Is that still a thing?
Field training exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's generic.
Yeah.
But
you go to basic and you have an FTX.
Sure.
Anyway, we had 2 more Bradleys deadline on the way out there. So we had 1 Bradley, and we had 1. We borrowed kind of for dismount purpose the platoon sergeant from another platoon, his Bradley. He didn't have any dismounts in there because he was paranoid about supply having his sensitive items, so he had 2 tough boxes of all his sensitive items in the back of his Bradley. And we had 2 squads of dismounts, so we're like, we have 1 fucking Bradley in our platoon at this point. So we broke one of our squads, being my squad, went with him, but he wouldn't take those fucking tough boxes out of the Bradley. So we had 7 dudes crammed into this Bradley with all the floor space. Think of it, you got these 2 tiny little benches. All the floor space is taken up with tough boxes. So we're all sitting like this for 10 hours at a time with our legs
a little bit
crossed.
real for you. The space that you're sitting in, okay, imagine if your desk right there is lined with a small bench, maybe 6-8 inches wide on either side, right?
Yeah.
Bring that space of your table in there, that's what, 36 inches? Bring it in about freaking 8 inches, alright? So when you're sitting across from somebody, your knees are interlocked. Plus you have all your gear that you have to bring with you.
Which, how much is gear weigh? What I've heard
Average
anywhere from 80 to 150.
It
Average, the standard weight is 35 pounds.
Okay.
But there's no pack out there in the United States Army that weighs 35
It's
pounds.
usually, I think in Afghanistan, the minimum that anyone carried was about 70.
Yeah.
Because even the riflemen, they probably, with body armor, uniform, helmet,
Pokey bait.
water, pokey bait, which is what we call
And
food,
and
then
ammo
ammo and weapon, they probably were sitting at around 60 pounds, because the M4 doesn't weigh that much, the ammo doesn't weigh that much, but then they'd get tasked to carry other bullshit,
Dragon,
like the
javelin.
Javelin, the fucking Thor, which is this backpack that it's supposed to interrupt like cell phone signals,
So they can pop on you.
the Taliban likes to use, and I'm sure Al Qaeda in Iraq likes to use.
Plus the T-40 gunners and the SAW gunners were taking all their extra ammo and freaking cross-loading it to everybody else.
Or the Goldie, which is my buddy Turner, the one who got killed over there, have the Goldie, which looks like a fucking hockey stick. And you're supposed to carry it front. It's supposed to pick up on tripwires, but we're in a rural environment, so we never really need to use it. And he'd sling it over his back, and then occasionally it would hit his ankle, and it'd trip him, and he'd just fucking face plant. I was always walking. Usually I was walking in front of him because I was the SAW gunner, and he was like off to the side of the wedge. But there was one patrol I was behind him, and I just watched him fall over and over again. It was great.
So, and I know we've talked
You
about
see at
this.
the time though, when you're doing that shit like in theater,
Oh, it fucking sucks.
you're just like fucking goddamn bullshit. Why do they make us do that?
But he only fell. I counted. He fell 12 times on that patrol. It was a long patrol. It was like six clicks, so 6 kilometers walking, which is a lot longer than it sounds when you're going through a rural area and you're, carrying, in my case, 110 pounds of shit.
You gotta remember too, we would practice doing this stuff. Like, what was the standard time for a 12-click run, or more of the standards?
For a 12-mile, the
12
standard
mile,
was 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah, that's not happening.
But it never took you that time in country because you went, But when we would do that, you'd have all that stuff loaded up on you, but you jogged it. You know, you basically were jogging it, and especially with people like short little fucking hobbit legs like I've got. I was running it.
They give you the 240.
Yeah,
They always give the short people the biggest gun because it's funny.
So
I had
squad,
240
the SAW squad
when it was
automatic
private,
weapon, right?
Yeah,
so is that the same as a 240?
No. So the 240 shoots 7.62, which is the equivalent of a 308.
Okay.
Linked 7.62 weighs about twice as much as linked 5.56, what a SAW shoots, which is a 2.23 for civilians. So you should be able to carry more linked 5.56. So the automatic rifleman in a normal dismounted squad carries a SAW. They're supposed to carry 800 rounds of ammo, whereas we have what's called weapons squad, which they have two 240s, which is longer. It weighs more.
Well, they came up with a 240 Golf though. They freaking minimized that.
We have with the Lima. The Golf's the one that the Marines had. The Lima's the one that was about 5 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
We had 2 of those. And then the weapon squad is built around those 240s. Like you have ammo bearers whose whole job is just to carry a fucking backpack of ammo. You've got assistant gunner, and the tripod. You've got assistant gunners who their job they kind of function as a team leader. Their job is just to direct gunfire
or take over the gun when freaking the gunner goes down.
So the automatic rifleman kind of, for a regular squad, they kind of encompass all of those roles. I mean, the team leader will kind of function as an AG, especially like for me, I had no magnification, so my team leader would direct me because like a lot of the firefights we got into, I was shooting like 600-700 meters out, and I'm literally just shooting at dots at that point, and he'd fucking up, okay, you got him,
Get the center of your head.
that kind of thing.
How much? So I've shot ARs before, and depending on the muzzle brake, there's a little bit of flash. I mean, how much of a muzzle flash are you trying to see through? Can you see anything, or are you just going?
It's not so much the muzzle. It's not so much the muzzle flash as I don't know how Iraq was, but in Afghanistan it's dust. So as soon as you shoot, it's just fucking dust everywhere. So I'd get a bead on, and you aim low because machine guns ride up. They tend to ride up into the right. So I'd aim down into the left slightly. I mean, I think in direction, I think depends on what
Kentucky windage.
Yeah. So I'd aim down into the left, and then you walk. It's called walking the rounds up onto the target. And I would just see dust, so my team leader would sit there with binos, and he'd tell me, up, okay, you got him, kind of thing.
It was difficult at night because you got your lasers and everything, and you're using night vision and stuff, and that dust would kick up. It was the same way in Iraq.
Yeah.
The dust would kick up.
You can't see shit.
The lasers, all you'd see is the refraction from the lasers and stuff. But that's why you train as a team.
Yeah.
So you got other guys who are watching stuff, and they're guiding you in. And there's you wouldn't just like full on hold on the automatic. You're not just shooting.
But that's how they do it in Hollywood. Isn't that accurate?
No, Hollywood and the internet are usually pretty accurate.
So there's. I mean, you can do that's called cyclic fire when you're just holding down the trigger, and that's like an oh shit situation.
Yeah. That's usually like if your OP is being breached because you have your interlocking sectors of fire, so one gun would be pointed this way, another gun would be pointed this way, and you're shooting on cyclic fire, so anybody who's coming into that would be hit. But usually, especially in weapons squad, you would have, we always called it talking guns. So one guy would shoot, and then you would stop because he would usually it was 7 to 9 rounds, so da 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 da, and then you'd stop, then the other guy would shoot, da 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 da. And so you'd get the guns talking. In an optimal world, that's what it's supposed to do. In a target-rich environment, everybody's just shooting as much as they can.
Yeah, we'd have. We'd have points where when I'd be reloading, and again, once they gave me the Mark 48 instead of the SAW, and because so Mark 48 is it's made by FN, it's a Belgian company. It was supposed to be an upgrade over the SAW because it shoots 7.62, but what they don't take into account is that linked 7.62 weighs twice as much as linked 5.56. So and I carried 650 rounds for that bitch. I had the heaviest kit in the fucking platoon by far. I think when I weighed myself, it was 110 pounds.
Jesus.
My kit weighed. So I carried 600 in my back, 50 round starting belt because the little clip that held the pouch or nutsack, as we called it, that was broken. So but to reload, I'd have to, unclip one of those pouches, rip the belt out. It would take me a couple seconds, and the team leader would usually just throw his M4 on burst for sustained fire. I know burst is like the cool thing in Call of Duty. It's fucking pointless in real life, except for providing some sort of supplement.
So
when I'm reloading, he puts it on burst to provide some.
They used to call it covering fire.
I've got
fire,
to shoot
suppressing
before.
Suppressive fire.
Went down to a thing where you could pay $50 and shoot all sorts of different shit. And one guy had what's the World War II?
Thompson?
No, it was mounted.
BAR?
It was MG42.
Huh?
MG42
was the German version of what later on became our
I think he machined his own or something. But you could just sit there and shoot into a mountainside. And that's fun. But, the rounds are going wherever they feel like, whenever they come out of that barrel.
That's why you do bursts.
Yeah.
Because the longer you hold that trigger, like the gun just goes...
Yeah.
where it wants to.
But at the range, like we were talking before offline, slow
as fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always done, albeit I have a semi-automatic pistol, so it's not shooting anywhere close to that, but I was more worried about accuracy. And I've heard other guys criticize that. You get the YouTube operators that want to get the full automatic.
Call of Duty guys.
Yeah.
The former
Real Team 6.
Yeah, the former Navy SEALs. And bunch of tools.
Usually,
I like Andy Stumpf. Of all the the fucking big name SEALs out there, I like because he's is a bit of a straight shooter and he's a little bit more down to earth. But a lot of them are fucking.
No, I remember my very first time I heard of Navy SEAL was watching the History Channel when it was still about history, and they did the bioptic on Hell Week, on whatever class that happened to be there. But they had, between showing shots of them going through Hell Week and shit like that, they had this guy who, at the time, he was a politician for whatever western state, one of the mountain states.
Yeah.
And he came across as just a colossal asshat.
He's a politician.
Oh yeah. Your average Navy SEAL can outperform any, Ivy League school, any D1 college athlete, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh wow. You guys are a bunch of dickheads. Like, cool. I'm never going to pay attention to this again. And then listening to Andy Stumpf for the first time, I'm like, oh, you're actually a human being.
I wanted to do that for a long time. I don't know if you remember that. But that was like my goal, because I was a swimmer growing up. Like, that was my thing. And it makes sense.
Bit of an asshole.
I don't know why you continue to hang out with me. But I realized once I got into actually got into the military, like that's like the Hollywood of the military. Yeah. If you'll notice, anytime something happens, like, oh, it was SEALs, like a lot of times it wasn't. A lot of times it was, what used to be called Delta Force or something a little bit more clandestine. But SEALs is who gets to be the face of it.
And it seems like, in my experience, operators, real operators, they don't ever talk about it.
No.
They don't go on TV. They don't self-aggrandize. They don't talk about themselves. They don't go in there and say, the SEALs are the best unit out there. Because almost always operators cannot operate without a freaking joint team coming together, and they all work together in order to facilitate one specific thing on a mission. Okay, we had ODA teams working with us, the Special Forces guys. They didn't talk about themselves at all. They didn't say a fucking word about it. You knew they were Special Forces. But you didn't. It's not like you're gonna go out there and go, "So, are you Special Forces?" Because they just look at you and go, "No," and then they'd walk away. Yeah. Most of the operators that I've ever met, they don't talk about it. They don't fucking let you know, and they don't want you to know. Because what they're doing is freaking. We had them on a couple of our missions, and they did their job. They did it really well, and then we didn't see them at our freaking AARs or anything after that. They just they melted back into the shadows and they went about their business. They were fucking consummate professionals, you know.
Like I said, SEALs are like the Hollywood.
Yeah. It's like they've built up their own freaking they built up their own image. Yeah. And so like they always have the dude who smoked freaking Osama. They always have him. Like he's all over the CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. He's always on there. He's always giving his opinion about stuff. He doesn't have a degree in geopolitical freaking stuff.
No,
he has one claim to fame.
He pulled the trigger and shot Osama.
And he was really smart at that point in time because he was in a dark room. He had night vision. Osama didn't, and he went, "Hey, Osama," and Osama went, "What?" And boom, he smoked him. Because he pulled his trigger at the first thing he moved. If we did that in our training environment, we would fucking be chastised hardcore.
I've been chastised for doing that.
We didn't have positive target identification. No, I'm not taking anything away from the training or anything or what those guys do. They're special. They do good things for this country. But I think a lot of times, to piggyback on what he's saying, it's like you always see them on TV now, and I think
that's
the real operators, if you come up to them with a microphone and say, "Hey, I'm from fucking CNN. What did you think about this?" They're gonna look at you and go, "No, I don't know. Shit happens," and they're gonna walk away.
That's just kind of the military in general, though. You can tell like who does shit and who doesn't. based on how they respond to attention.
Yeah.
Like that. Like when we were flying back from Afghanistan, we went through Manassas Air Force Base, like everyone does, and a couple of fucking senators showed up. I don't remember who it was at this point. I'm assuming they were Republicans because they're usually the ones that like to get FaceTime and being like, look how much we care about the troops. None of them do, but they're the ones that like to pretend.
As long as it's in their district,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it was a couple of Republican senators that showed up, and there were a bunch of pogues over there meeting with them, and all of us, guys that have been off the fob for fucking 11 months, are just sitting there, and they're like, "Hey, you want to go over and meet them?" And we're all like, "Nah, man.
You want to talk to the media?
I don't give a fuck."
It's just nothing to do with that, man.
It's the easiest way to tell like who does shit and who doesn't is most people who are doing shit don't really want the attention.
So the two takeaways I got from the Navy SEALs, or the special operations side of the house, it's a lot of the guys that like Andy Stumpf, who are more down to earth, seem to just look in themselves like, we all do the same job. It's just we got different training because we were expected to do a different.
Yeah, that's the best way he describes it.
A specialized role.
Yeah,
that's
their role, and it's a very difficult role.
Yeah,
and so they're expected. They're they're ordered to go do something that is extremely difficult. So they're gonna get freaking training for it. And should they be proud of it? Yeah, they should. And I don't take anything away from those guys.
No, I
wouldn't. But the real dudes, the motherfuckers, the OGs, the 1%ers.
Don't say shit.
They don't fucking talk about it, dude.
I have
they don't write books. They don't fucking sit there.
I think I've told you about my buddy Neil, who I was in Navy ROTC with him. He was a psycho. Like this dude would like put his mind to something, and he'd be like, "I'm gonna do this," and he'd put his mind to it, and he'd fucking crush it. Like he was at one point, he was like, I think I want to run a marathon, and he trained for like 4 months, and he ran the St. Paul Marathon because I was at the finish line because we for community outreach had done like some volunteering, so I was clocking at the finish line. He crossed the finish line in 2 hours and 42 minutes, which is roughly a 6-minute pace per mile. After like 4 months of training, like the dude would put his mind to something, and he would just fucking obsess. And lo and behold, of the like 10 of us that wanted to be SEALs, he was the one that made it. And I actually saw him in Bliss right after I got back from Afghanistan. He just came walking up to me, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like he was there training with SF, but this dude has not posted shit on his Facebook page in years. He doesn't talk about it. He just does it, and I don't know what he's doing at this point. I don't even know if he's still in, because he doesn't talk about it.
I think there are some guys out there in the opera like Jocko or Marcus Luttrell, guys who went through an experience. They talk about that experience, but really they don't really talk about it's. Yeah. They just don't talk about it. And operators, Mr. Salisbury, who we interviewed, he was in special ops, and he point blank told us he was not going to talk about anything about that.
Yeah.
He's like, don't even ask me because you're wasting your fucking time.
No, when I saw him again at the New Year's party, I you had to ball bust him a little bit. I said, "Hey, when are we going to talk about your time with the alphabet soup?" And he goes, "Oh, I can't." I'm like, "I understand. I'm just giving you a hard time. I got it." But
that's just the way those guys are.
Yeah.
And most 99% of them that I've met, if you didn't know their background ahead of time, they won't. You'd never know.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd never know unless you walk into their house because they do keep mementos. Some of them are weird.
I've had a couple good run-ins though. When I was in Afghanistan, FOB Altimer, which was like the tiny FOB that our battalion was at, had an SF compound, and those dudes would show up. Our sergeant major, like all sergeant majors, didn't know shit about his job and was just obsessed with like people being in correct uniform, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they like.
I
don't know if they like. I don't know if. Like, I mean, you made it to first sergeant, so you might have more insight on this. I don't know if they get a fucking lobotomy when they go to sergeant major academy.
Here's what it is. They're so far removed that they get encapsulated into small things that they can control.
Yeah,
that's so like uniform policy. The uniform standards and everything. That's the things that they can that they're encapsulated to because they're doing other stuff and they're doing good work. A good sergeant major though.
No, he wasn't.
A good sergeant major is the guy who goes out there and he's just like he walks into the troops and just like, hey man, how's it going? What's going on?
Yeah, you'd walk in and be like, everyone wearing their knee pads, and like, no, nobody's wearing their fucking knee pads because those things cut off your circulation.
But it gets hard to me. One of the best sergeant majors I ever freaking worked with, a guy named Rob. Oh god, what was his name? Oh, I forget his name now. I probably shouldn't mention it. But he was one of those ones. Like everybody would see him, they'd all take their hands out of their pockets,
Yeah.
Because for some reason that's a sergeant major magnet,
Yeah.
And he'd come up and he'd be like, "Why'd you take your hands out of your pocket?" He's like, "Oh, don't want to make you mad, sergeant major." He's like, "Well, if the army didn't want you to have them, they wouldn't have freaking given them on your pants. Put your hands in there. It's fucking cold out here." That dude's all right. But some of them get so, and they get so far removed of what the actual work is.
That's how Uncle Mo was. We called him Uncle Mo. His first name was Morris. So behind his back, everyone called him Uncle Mo. And he cared mostly about, if you were in the right uniform. And again, we're in fucking Afghanistan, and nobody's uniform's clean. But like, if he sees dirt, like, you better wash that. Like, whatever, man. Never mind. Camo works better when you let it pick up dust and shit.
Yeah.
But so on the fob, he would stand at the entrance, and like whenever he felt like it, he'd stand at the entrance to the chow hall. And he'd make sure that one, you had a battle buddy, because even though we're grown ass adults, you gotta go everywhere with a friend. He'd make sure that you had your weapon on you, because we're on the fob and we don't have ammo issued, but you gotta have it with you. And he'd make sure everything was right. And so my buddy Joe, who was on the podcast, we used to go to the chow hall together. So Joe and I are going to the chow hall, and there's an SF dude in front of us, and we know he's SF because he's wearing a tan T-shirt, pajama pants, and flip-flops. And then they're fucking basic flannel pajama pants, and he's wearing his shower shoes, and he doesn't have his weapon.
I think those guys did that as on purpose.
Oh yeah.
As a big fuck you, I can do whatever.
And he didn't have his weapon on or anything. And he gets up, he's right in front of us, and he gets up to the front of the chow line, and we see Sergeant Major he takes a big breath, his shoulders go up, he goes to do the knife
ears start turning pink,
and this dude who was probably a staff sergeant or something, just snaps his fingers and he goes, "I don't fucking work for you," and he walks into the chow hall, and and his face is just red, and we're trying not to laugh because we do work for him and he can make our lives miserable, but that dude, yeah, I know he was SF because he just did what he wanted, and it was fucking great. We had that, and then one dude when I was at Carson, because there's an SF compound in Carson. He had his patch on. He's coming out of one of the medical places. We were in line to get one of the many vaccines they made us get, and we had this dude in our platoon. His name was Dixon. He was a fucking moron and would just run his mouth about whatever.
Weird. Do you need Dixon? That was a fucking.
I don't know, but he would just run his fucking mouth, and we were standing out there, and he was talking about SF for some reason, and he was overweight. And he had this stupid high pitched voice, and he's talking. He's like, "I don't give a shit about no special forces." And this dude's walks past him as he says it, and he stops. And Dixon's in the middle of eating a donut, and the dude just looks over his shoulder at him. He's like, "Yeah, keep on eating that donut, you fat fuck. See how that works for you." And he walks off, and we're just dying. Those are the two instances where I bumped into someone who was SF, and it's just funny.
The ODA guys, the SF guys that we worked with, they never went to chow hall. You never saw them.
Yeah.
They had their own compound off, and they did their own thing. Every now and then, some of us would get tasked out to go over there and do their bitch work for them and shit,
Yeah.
And it was right around that time that Ranger video came out, Yeah, Rangers, shoot guns, And there's that one part, it was like, "What about special forces? Fuck special forces!" So we would always say that when we'd see it.
That was 08?
Yeah.
I was in college when that came out.
So in 09, 2010, you see the SF guy, "What about special forces?" And the one guy turned around, his name was Bill, he just turned around and goes, "Fuck special forces!" That dude's cool. You'd see him in the gym constantly, just crushing it in the gym. But yeah, man, those dudes, they were cool. They were just cool.
Yeah.
It was and they never talked about anything. They talk about regular shit, like what you did back at stateside.
I wish I
family or girlfriend or kids.
Just curious.
I wish I'd tried for it. I had a date to go, and then they told me I had a date that I was going to go to selection, and then they told me that I was going to PCS to Carson, and I was like, "Oh, I'll take that. I want to get the fuck out of El Paso, and then I'll go to selection once I get to Carson." And then my unit at Carson was a black hole that just sucked people's careers in, and that was the end of their Army career. So I lost all my motivation. Yeah, that was how it was described to me the day I showed up. They're like, "This is the black hole of the army," and I'm like, "I don't believe you." And then like a year later, I'm getting the fuck out. Like this place sucks so bad. But I wish I don't know if I would have passed or not. Most people don't, but I wish I'd tried.
Well, it's something. SEALs. Hell Week. You hear the recruitment numbers. Well, let me back up. So growing up, reading history books, especially come Vietnam era, it was like the Green Berets were the thing that the boogeyman looked under his bed for.
It's different jobs.
Right? No, I agree. Yeah. But I am saying, as a civilian who's never even come close to serving, the way that it's been portrayed in popular media was that the Navy SEALs were the boogeyman, Vietnam era. Then all of a sudden they became kind of the poster child for recruitment, if you will.
For Navy recruitment,
yeah. And then Navy SEALs were that thing that, do they exist? Do they not exist? Oh, the frogman, blah, blah, blah. They're the boogeyman. Yeah. Well, then fast forward, now they seem to be that. They are the recruitment poster child for SS. But Delta Force is now a thing. That is...
It's not called that anymore.
It's been Delta Force anymore.
It was called CAG for a while, which is Close Action Group. Then it was called ACE. I don't even know what the fuck it's called anymore.
But I
had a squad leader. Yeah. I had a squad leader try out for it, and he said it's what's called a gentleman's course, which means it's not they're not in your face like fucking screaming, and it's not like basic training. He said it was literally like their land av course would be like, hey. Saddle. Like, this is what a saddle's, like, really? Like, so that's what this says. You see that saddle, like, 5 miles that way? Go fucking walk to it. He said that was their land navigation. He made it about a week, and he said he woke up the one morning and his legs, like, were just locked, stiff. He couldn't walk anymore. And so he failed out. Well, he had an issue with that where, like, he was in really good shape, but he'd get to a point where his legs would just quit on him.
Yeah.
So he talked about, he made it about a week into Delta or whatever it's called now.
I know two guys who went to selection. Neither of them made it.
I know one that went to selection. He made it. He got fucked later on, but he was a Native American. And he was crazy. Like when he was in Afghanistan, he had this idea that he was convinced that there were gems in the mountains, like gems, right? That he was gonna find gems in these caves. So
he's out and freaking sapphires and shit.
Again, yes. So again, he's Native American, and he's like 100% Native American. He's dark, and he went out the one day in flip flops, PT shorts, and he had a tan T-shirt tied around his head because he's a fucking idiot. And he's in the caves, and he comes out, and there's an Apache flying around, and it sees him, and he starts booking it back to the OP. And the Apache, because he's brown, and he's got a fucking T-shirt on his head, and the Apache follows him all the way back. But this dude went to selection. And he fucking, on the LADNAV course, he lost something. I don't remember if it was his map or his compass, but he lost something, and he was just like, oh man, I think I'm supposed to go that way. And the STAR course, which is the LADNAV course at selection, is notoriously difficult. Like you're walking like a couple miles between points, so if you're not dead on, you like even a little bit of drift.
You're 5 degrees off the start.
You go even 1 degree off the start and you're way the fuck off because it's just like a post like this big coming out of the ground. So if you're not near it, you're not going to fucking see it. He'd fucking walk for a while. He'd find a point and be like, oh, I think this is my point. So he'd just write it down. He did that like 3 times. He passes the fucking STAR course, ends up passing selection, and then like 2 days before he goes to the Q course, because the selection's 4 weeks long. It's how they weed out most people. And then they go to the Q course, which is like, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is. And that's where they do most of their training. Selection's just to weed most people out. Like 2 days before going to the Q course.
400 people go to selection, maybe 2 go through.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more than that. It's not a lot though.
Yeah.
But before,
I know the big number is thrown around with Navy SEAL Hell Week, or training, but
it's like 10%, or something like that. Anyway, this dude's like 2 days from going to the Q course, and he's down at the Pueblo State Fair, and as he's leaving, he gets pulled over, and they breathalyze him, and he is over the legal limit, and our BC battalion commander was big on like kick him the fuck out, and then it came back later that they actually did not do it properly when they breathalyzed him, and he was not over the legal limit, but our BC still didn't give a shit and still kicked him out of the Army. So he got fucked, but that's the one guy I knew who passed selection. just by winging it on the fucking land nav course because he lost his fucking compass. God.
That's pretty badass, though.
It is pretty badass.
That's pretty badass.
It is pretty badass.
It's fucking.
I think I'm supposed to go this way, like, yeah.
Dead reckoning, yeah, somewhere in the vicinity.
I am one with the land, or whatever bullshit. But
no, what's the if you listen to Andy Stone's podcast, he jokes about, you know, when you get your seal contract, it comes with a publisher
and a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be the new
a book
thing.
deal and a podcast.
Yeah. And who was it? Marcinko, wasn't it? He was the first one to really write a book coming out of the SEALs or SF community.
I don't remember.
Dick Marcinko, I think.
But yeah, he was the first. Yeah, Richard Marcinko.
Yeah. And then you get documentaries with Charlie Sheen, you know, SEALs, or was it Navy SEALs? I think whatever that movie was fucking titled.
Yeah. They're all carrying MP5s and shit. Yeah.
And blows the guy backwards 10 feet when he shoots him, dropping through the skylight.
It's a fucking 9mm round. Yeah, it's a blast. My favorite comment of Sus is when he's making fun of Jocko. You know, he's always like gets out of bed at like 4:30 and he's like up before the enemy or whatever, and he's like, I want to create my own hashtag. It's called Up at a Reasonable Hour. I can get on board with that one.
But like I was saying with the SEALs now being the poster child, again, that's outside popular media. You know, this is what's really cool. This is what it's all about. Blah blah. Look at these cool clips of these guys run through the mud shooting full automatic miniguns off these boats. Is it like that? I mean, is there recruitment on the inside for guys that are already in? Do they have the cool posters or the videos or anything like that? Or
I wasn't in the Navy, but
no. Well, I mean, so Rangers for Army.
They don't really recruit that hard. To be honest,
Rangers don't need to recruit. You get a lot of volunteers.
I had a contract to go out for about 3 days in basic training, and that was one of the first times that the green weenie, fucking slammed its way up my ass, because I did 299 PT score in basic training. I remember because I ran like a 1308 or something, and our drill sergeant was like, it was the highest score in the platoon, and the drill sergeant's like, really? You couldn't just get a 300? Start pushing, and he smoked the fuck out of me because I got a 299 instead of a 300. Nobody else who got worse than me got smoked, but I got smoked. So I had that, and then like my GT score was really fucking high, so they were like, do you want to go to RASP, which is the Ranger, I think it's Ranger Assessment and Selection Program or something like that. It's the equivalent of selection for SF, and I was like, fuck yes, I want to go to RASP. So I wrote letters to my wife, to my parents, was like, I'm going to be here a few months longer, because that's also held at Fort Benning. Like, I'm going to RASP, fuck yes, and like 3 days later, they're like, oh, yeah, never mind, we didn't actually get those slots, so you're not going. I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah. So Ranger School is almost a prerequisite now for officers or
for Ranger. Oh,
for Ranger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to be an officer in the United States Army, so you'll go from.
Especially if you're infantry.
If you're infantry, you have to go to Ranger School, and if you don't pass, you're not going to be in the infantry for very much longer.
I did have an officer who had not passed.
It's rare.
So he didn't pass because him and a staff sergeant got into it it was pretty far in, I think it was Swamp Phase, and they because he was a bit of a hothead, and he punched the staff sergeant in the face, and then we were like, did you win the fight? And he's like, no, he beat the fuck out of me. He's like, I got one good punch in, and like I hit him good, and then he beat the fuck out of me, but because he instigated it and because he was the officer, they failed him out, and then they let the staff sergeant pass. So we gave him a bunch of shit for that, but I don't know if they let him stay infantry just because of the circumstances to that, but
Ranger School is almost.
He was a good officer.
So if you pass Ranger School, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to stay in. You have the opportunity to go to get your commission, I assume.
No, I mean you'll have your commission before you go to Ranger School.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they go to OCS, and then you got a class into what you're going to commission in. So infantry guys will go to IBOLIC, Infantry Officer Basic Leadership Course.
Yeah.
And then once they pass that, I think they go to command school, or is that no? They either go to Ranger School.
Yeah.
I
think so.
Or I think they have to have. I want to say air assault or airborne, one of the two, or maybe both. I know they got to do those schools at some point in their career if you're going to stay in the infantry. But Ranger School is a foregone conclusion. If you're an officer, if you're enlisted, you got to get a slot, like he was talking.
It's
about.
hard.
It's very hard to do.
Well, that was for RASP. So RASP and Ranger School are two different things.
True. That is
Ranger School gets you a tab on your shoulder that says Ranger on it, and it means you sucked it up for 2 months and dealt with one of the hardest schools in the military. But it doesn't get you into a Ranger battalion. That's RASP, which actually gets you into a Ranger battalion. I've heard it both ways, that like if you go through RASP without a Ranger tab and you get to a Ranger battalion and you don't have that tab, they will make your life absolute fucking hell until you get a tab. But so
they're very Rangers are different. They're, especially when it comes to Ranger stuff, they're very particular. They're very protective of that tab, and
But when we
the
say
whole
Ranger,
thing, like with women getting through and stuff like that, there was all that stuff that happened with that. And
when we say Ranger School, we're talking about the tab.
Sure.
So anyone can do that, and that's hard to get slots for too. I had at least 3 different times where I was going through. I went through the paperwork, like I was building up to it, and then it came down to we just don't have the slots. And then I eventually just lost motivation after they fucked me like 3 times. So
even to get freaking considered for a slot is pretty freaking kind of a big deal, especially within units, because a lot of the regular line units don't get a lot of them. A lot of the guys that I saw had Ranger written into their contract.
Yeah.
Coming out of basic, so they were going straight from basic training straight to Ranger School. Either that or they're going air assault and then they were going to Ranger School. So I mean, it's a big deal, but it is the most difficult small unit leadership course in the world, in my opinion. And people die going to that school. It's no joke.
So I'll put it in perspective. When I ran into Neil, who's my buddy who's in the SEALs, when I ran into him after coming back from Afghanistan in Bliss, we talked. We sat there and talked for like an hour, and I'd mentioned that I was trying really hard to go to Ranger School. And he's like, "Oh man, that fucking sucks." And this is a man who's been through buds. Like, just to put that into perspective, like Ranger School fucking sucks. I know sappers like to look at my tab. Sapper school is harder. We call it a crapper. We call it a crapper tab for a reason.
Yeah.
If I bring Lieutenant Pfeiffer on here eventually, he has a sapper tab, and I gave him a ton of shit for it.
The only other school I heard that was like really very challenging that could be compared to it, that the Rangers were kind of like, oh yeah, was the Ramshead, the Mountain Warfare School that they have in Vermont. And I only saw one guy in my career in 20 years who had that.
Yeah.
I saw a ton of Rangers, but I only saw one guy who had the Ramshead.
Yeah.
And apparently that is an extremely difficult school.
Yeah.
But I had no ambition to go to that. Basically, you lose toes when you go to that because you're going to get frostbite.
Sniper school is a tough one.
Sniper school.
I actually turned that down, which I still regret.
Yeah.
There were 4 of us that tried out for our for the sniper section of our battalion, and I was one of the 3 that got picked. But I was supposed to go to WLC, which is the Warrior Leadership Course for sergeants. That at the same time they wanted to send me to sniper school, so I was like, no, just take the other guy instead out of the 4. And like, I'll do WLC and then I'll come over. Well, they never opened up spots again, so that was a lesson learned. Which is why when I got offered a new job that paid almost 20% more, I was like, I've learned my lesson with turning things down. It was fun. I mean, we went out to the field and worked on stocks for a few days, and I learned that I'm pretty good at stalking. It was fun. You have to. So when you do stocks for snipers, you have to get in a position where you can see the guys who have like.
So he's talking about STALK.
Yeah.
Stalking.
Yeah.
Not stalking, really. Yeah.
But you'll have a couple guys who I know in sniper school, because I had a good friend who was an instructor at sniper school for 3 years, and they'd sit in the back of a pickup truck with the high-powered binos, looking for people, you have to get in a position where you can see them and identify them without them spotting you. If they spot you, they'll call a spotter who's got this giant flag, and he puts himself within like 15 feet of you, and they try to walk him on to your position. Like they'll tell him, walk 5 paces forward, turn 90 degrees to your right, whatever. They try to get him on top of you, and if he can do that, and they get him on top of you, you're out. So you have to get in position. You have to notionally fire, which means you have to yell firing a bunch of times, and then they'll hold up a letter number combo, and you have to correctly identify it. Because if some people will be like where they can kind of see him, they're like hiding behind a fucking boulder or something. So that's how they weed that kind of shit out. And then at that point, the spotter puts himself within 15 feet of you, and they get a chance to walk him on. And if they can't do it, then you have to get out without them spotting you. And that's the hard part, because now they know kind of where you're at. And I think the first one I did, I found a bush in Colorado. When we were in Colorado, we had these huge bushes, and I got like underneath it, under the lowest branches, and I climbed up into the middle of the bush and set the 2010, which is the sniper rifle, on a Y branch. They could fucking see me clearly, but I was inside the bush. So I took the shot, and they're like, we can see that motherfucker, and they're trying to walk the spotter onto me, but because I was inside of this massive bush, they couldn't get the spotter on, and I could hear them over the radio like, fuck that motherfucker, I can see him. The spotter's like, and they can't help the instructors at all. The spotter can't, and they'll try to kind of assist you if they can. Mm-hmm. So he's like, they don't want to like clearly make it look like they're stepping over you kind of thing, because that'll give you away. So he's not telling them. He's just like, nope, I'm not on him. They're like, I can see you on top of him. He's like, 6 feet behind me because he's outside the bush. And I had to wait. They nailed some other dude who was trying to exfil after he took a shot. And when they did that, I just like dropped to the ground and laid there for like probably a half hour before I moved again. But that shit's fun. I really enjoyed that. I wish I had actually taken that opportunity, because that was a lot of fun.
So the hard part about sniper school, from what I understood, is like
the shooting.
Because you have to have your spotter there with you, and they got to do all the math.
And you're tied together.
And you're tied together. Yeah. So if your spotter's not really good at it,
the spotter is harder. The spotter is harder than the shooter, because the spotter has to do all the math. You have to figure out windage, and then you're just basically putting those commands into the scope, and you're pulling the trigger. So spotter's the hard part. And
leading up to spotter, sniper, spot, are you both going through the same school, or is it a?
Yeah, you both have to do both roles. Okay. Yeah. But
so if your spotter goes through and passes his shooting, and you spotted for him, you did all your math right, you got him to pass, but then you flip flop it, and he's not very good at it, you'll fail, not him.
That's what happened. One of the 3 guys who ended up going failed out for that reason.
For that reason,
yeah. He got
screwed over by the spotter.
He got screwed over by the spotter. So
fuck.
It happens.
On a lighter note.
Yeah. But yeah, well, I suppose we're pushing.
There's a lot of good. I'd say there's a lot of good schools, and I would say anyone who listens who wants to. Is looking to go into the military, like, take advantage of that shit, because I did not, and it's like one of the few regrets that I have with my career is that I didn't take advantage of, especially sniper school, because that one I had in front of me. Ranger school, I just got fucked. Wasn't really my fault, but sniper school I could have done. If you get those opportunities in front of you, just take them.
Oh
yeah. Some of them will suck, but take them.
Don't listen to the social justice woke bullshit that's freaking going on in the Army or any of the branches right now. Be a killer, because that's what it takes. You got to be a freaking, you got to have some killer instinct in there involved.
I will
but
say.
That's getting into my personal politics. So.
I will say that, like, I don't hold anyone's like background against them, or I don't hold anyone's like. Whatever your sexual orientation is, whatever you want to call yourself, I don't give a shit. But I will say that the Army's newest like line of recruiting
is ridiculous.
Is whack.
It's a joke.
Like, you watch, what was the commercial? What was the commercial where the girl's talking about her 2 moms?
Yeah.
And she just keeps saying it, and she's the first time, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I'm glad you had 2 loving parents, because a lot of people don't. And I'm very happy for you, but then she just keeps talking about it. And I'm like, how does this inform your, like, how you are as a soldier. Like I was saying before, everyone comes from different backgrounds in the Army, and no one gives a shit where you came from. Like, they care about how you perform as a soldier.
If you
the
can
Army's
pass
too
the
caught up
standard,
in that
if
shit.
you can pass the standards, right, or exceed the standards, I don't give a fuck if you got 2 moms.
Right.
You know, I give a fuck about how well you're going to be able to do
I
your
imagine
job.
that's
you know?
We had guys who were openly gay, and no one gave a fuck because they were great performers.
Every
no
single fucking unit out there had gay dudes.
And it was actually kind of heartwarming because I had a guy, I had another E5 who I was talking to at one point, and he's like, I used to be really homophobic. It's like I used to be, but like working with, I'm blanking on his name because he was in another platoon. I think it was Duran. He's like working with Duran for like the last year. Like I realized that like maybe that was kind of a stupid position for me to take.
I've seen it,
it was just kind of nice.
I've seen it where the rank and file freaking embrace it almost. It's like, and like the gay dude like was telling regular straight soldiers, even if you were gay, I would not date you because you're ugly as fuck.
That's always weird when they're like, oh, they're gonna come after me. I'm like, no, they're not. Nobody wants you. Like women don't want you. Why would guys want you?
The thing is, especially infantry dudes, if we can find one single thing to pick on you about, we're gonna pick on you.
Oh yeah.
So an openly gay dude who came in, it was like, yeah, I'm gay. Everybody's like, oh no, I have nothing to pick on you about. And if you admit it, it's like it's more fun when you deny it. Gay dude's like, and it like, and Sanchez was fucking awesome, man, because he was. Maybe if we put a dress on you and some makeup, maybe. Like, well, then why don't you just go for girls? Nah, you don't have the right plumbing. But Sanchez, he would pass his PT test 300. He's freaking anything that you asked of him, he would freaking.
That's all most people care about, and I will say the same thing. The same thing goes for women. Like when they announced that they were letting women in the infantry, I was like, good. Like I know female soldiers that could very well do my job.
Yeah.
The problem that I have more of is like how the Army's going to implement it.
Lowering the standards. Yeah.
Because what's going to happen, because biologically, I know people get mad at me for saying this nowadays, but men and women are built differently. Like men have higher bone density. The average man can take more physical punishment than the average woman. That's just, evolution. That's how we're built. So you send people through basic training, a higher percentage of men are going to pass than women. And if that's just what happened, that'd be fine. But the Army's going to look at that and be like, well, 60% of men are... I'm just spitballing numbers here. This doesn't mean anything. Like, well, 60% of men are passing, only 40% of women. So we got to change the standard so that 60% of women pass. So now you have 20% of those women that shouldn't... Like, that extra 20% shouldn't have passed is what's going to happen. And to be fair... This shit was already happening before they started letting women in. There were a lot of men that I served with who should not have been in the fucking infantry.
That is true.
But it's only gonna and like there's some things that they do get preferential treatment on, particularly when it comes to hygiene things. And I get that they have different requirements, but that shit has to be equal. It has to be equal, otherwise you're gonna end up with resentment. Like we had.
Resentment causes more problems in a friggin' unit than anything else.
We had one female on our cop. She was the PA, so, physical. What the fuck does that stand for? They're like doctors, but physician's assistant.
Yeah.
Got it.
Assistant, yeah.
So she was a captain. She was a physician's assistant. She was the lead medical person. They would fly her back to get showers. The rest of us went 2.5 months without a shower.
You see that shit all the time, but it breeds resentment.
And again, I fully understand that as a female, her hygiene requirements are very different, and she cannot go 2.5 months without showering, or she's going to have some fucking issues. But the problem is when you have that difference in how people are treated, it breeds resentment. Even if there is a logical explanation for it, which there was, it's going to breed resentment. And while I agree with the fact that women should be in the infantry, I don't think the fucking Army is going to handle it well, because I've been in the Army.
It's the Army, yeah, we know. Look, it'd be highly hypocritical for I'm the father of 3 daughters, and
I got 2.
I would never ever tell my girls you cannot do something because you're a girl. I would never ever tell them that, and it'd be freaking the height of hypocrisy. And I would never tell anyone you can't do something because you're a girl. You can't do something because you can't maintain the standard. This is the standard, and this has been we've ironed this out over how many wars you want to go through, starting with the Revolutionary War. There's reasons why we have those standards. They're put there for a reason,
Yep.
And if we cannot maintain that standard, and I have met women who could do it.
Oh yeah.
I've met women who could do it and who could do it well.
We tried to flip one out because we had this guy who was scrawny and awful, and we had for some reason we were shooting with some of the pokes in our battalion, and this one redheaded chick shot really well, and my squad leader's like, "Can we trade Blaine for her? Like, can we just have her?" Like, obviously that didn't happen, but Blaine was super pissed. But
that's getting to my point. I've seen more men who could not do it.
This is true.
And
I think that's just...
it's a detriment because the Army strives to keep those men in place, whereas we don't really freaking strive to say, okay, women, this is the standard.
Yeah.
Hit it.
As long as
the
they
you want to break the ceiling, here's the standard.
One standard.
Break it. And I think that's what we should be doing, and we don't. We lower the standard, and so that allows substandard soldiers to be in where they shouldn't. That's going to cost
a lot of substandard men. To be fair,
a lot of substandard.
A lot of and that was I still remember it in basic training. We had he wasn't in my platoon. But we had two drill sergeants above the rest who were fucking brutal. One was in my platoon. Got a lot of people to quit. I've probably talked about him before. The Russian dude. Drill Sergeant Kaluzny was a fucking psychopath, but we had one other drill sergeant in our company who was awful. Hodges, I think his name was, and at one point he came in. We were farther along in basic training, so it was when they only had one drill sergeant at night, and he was the only one on, and he was fucking wasted, right? And he dragged the whole company out there, and he basically, like, in his highly inebriated state, was like, the reason I'm so hard on you. And he told us the story. He was in fucking Iraq, and his best friend was another squad leader. He was a staff sergeant, and he had a private who was fucking sucking wind because he wasn't in shape. And so they stopped so he could take weight out of this private's pack and put it in his pack. And while they were stopped, he got shot in the head by a fucking sniper because this private was weak. And he was like, "That's why I'm hard on you." He's like, "I don't want anyone to die because somebody that I passed through basic training was weak." And that's true. Like, bad privates, like weak privates, are like drunk drivers. They don't get themselves killed; they get everyone around them killed. And the way the Army, like, I haven't been in it a few years, but the way I've watched the Army going, and like this whole like trying to be as kind and friendly to people as possible, is going to get a lot of fucking people killed. Which is way worse than hurting some people's feelings.
Correct.
That's just, you cannot treat. And I get in, our overall society not hurting people's feelings, because, nobody should ever be fucking made to feel like they're less because of who they are, right? The Army's just, like, the military's just different. Man,
the military needs to be segregated.
You can't take feelings into account. At any point.
You're entering into a profession that the sole purpose is to kill other human beings.
Yep.
At that point, you have to come to that realization, and then you have to say, "I'm sorry, your personal feelings are not relevant in this respect. We need tough men who are willing to kill people
or
while
tough
you
women.
sleep, or tough women. We need tough people. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
We need rough people who are willing to kill other people while you sleep peacefully in your bed at night.
Don't care what color you are.
Don't care. It doesn't matter color. It doesn't matter creed. It doesn't matter gender.
It doesn't matter what you call yourself. It doesn't matter.
A woman can pull a trigger. Look at the Russians, the Soviet freaking snipers during World War II.
Yeah.
They were fucking lethal.
Well, statistically, women are better shots than men are.
Yeah, they were fucking lethal.
Yeah.
I know a lot of historians credit the Russians to beating back, especially in Stalingrad.
Especially in Stalingrad. You're to those female snipers. There's no freaking reason out there to say that a woman can't kill better than a man simply because she's a woman. Give me a break, man. The history is freaking. There's full of examples in history of women who could do just that. Some of them were very good at it. It's the height of stupidity.
Yeah, it's most married women, right?
They're most married
Right.
women. Yeah.
Kelly's never gonna watch this. So
Anyways, I gotta wrap things up, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're pushing 2 hours here. So again, appreciate you guys coming back. It's nice to actually. I think this is the first episode you guys have been.
Yeah,
in
this is the first time we've been
together.
face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He's
next
a
time,
strapping young lad. Yeah.
next time we get together, you're gonna have your books with you. You're
Yes.
gonna have it read.
It's in the car. I brought it. I
We're
read
gonna
chapter
have
1 this morning.
Notes.
Fucking
So yeah,
homework. God damn.
I have notes, scattered throughout this whole thing, and it'll be fun. But,
Yeah.
Want to do my homework for him?
Yeah. Other than that, thanks everyone for tuning in this week, and we'll catch you guys whenever we can get back together again.
Cheers.
See ya.